Some cities never sleep. What about the ones that are wide awake and completely silent? This isn't a story about a city where people stop talking. It's about one where no one was truly listening. This is the story of the quiet city. New Haven wasn't a small town, but it wasn't famous either. It was a place that lived somewhere between ambition and exhaustion. Gleaming skyscrapers stood right next to abandoned warehouses. The coffee shops were always full, yet a deep loneliness sat at every single table. At red lights, car horns screamed in frustration. Trains rattled past old, forgotten neighborhoods. And phones. Phones vibrated non-stop in every pocket. The city was loud, incredibly loud, but no one, not a single person, felt heard. In a narrow apartment on the fourth floor of a worn-out building lived Ethan Miller. He was 23 years old, a delivery driver by trade, but an observer by nature. Now, Ethan wasn't special in the way movies like to pretend people are. Didn't have a tragic backstory dramatic enough for the evening news. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He just noticed things. That was his quiet, unspoken gift. He noticed the way people sighed just before answering, "I'm fine." He saw how strangers on the street avoided eye contact, staring at their phones like they were lifelines. He sensed the deep silence hiding behind the city's constant noise. Every morning, Ethan rode his bike through the bustling streets, delivering food to people who rarely looked him in the eyes. "Leave it at the door. Don't ring the bell." There were voices without faces, connections without contact. Ethan shared his small apartment with his mother, Linda. There was a time when Linda used to talk a lot. She would sing while she cooked. She'd ask questions and actually wait for the answers. But then, life happened. Ethan's father left when Ethan was just 15. It wasn't a dramatic exit. There was no big fight, no shouting, no slammed doors, just silence. One day his dad went to work, and he never came back. No goodbye note, no explanation. And over time, Linda slowly learned how to speak less. Now, she worked long, draining shifts at a nursing home, came home tired, heated up leftovers, and watched TV with the volume just loud enough to drown out her own thoughts. Ethan would sit across the room, pretending to scroll through his phone, but really, he was listening to the heavy silence that had grown between them. Sometimes he desperately wanted to ask her if she was okay, but he was terrified of the answer. There was one place in the city that Ethan liked more than any other, a small, unassuming coffee shop on 8th Street called Blue Hour. It wasn't fancy, the chairs didn't match, and the walls were covered with handwritten notes from customers. Most people who came in never even bothered to read them. But Ethan did. He read notes about heartbreak, notes filled with quiet hope, notes about feeling utterly invisible in a city of millions. Behind the counter worked Grace, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes and a voice that was always calm. She remembered people's names. That simple act in a city so anonymous made people feel seen. One evening, as Grace handed Ethan his coffee, she said, "You listen a lot." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "What?" She offered a soft, knowing smile. "Most people are just waiting for their turn to talk. You actually hear people?" Ethan didn't know how to respond. No one had ever said that to him before. It felt like being seen for the very first time. On his delivery routes, Ethan passed the same park every day, and every day the same man sat on the same bench. He always wore a gray jacket and old worn-out boots. His eyes looked like they had seen far too much of the world. Most people walked right past him, pretending he wasn't there. But one rainy afternoon, Ethan stopped. He walked over and held out a sandwich. "You hungry?" he asked. The man looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and confusion. "People don't ask that anymore," he said, his voice raspy. Ethan sat down on the bench with him, and they sat together in the quiet rain. After a few minutes, the man spoke. "I used to be a teacher." Ethan didn't say anything. He just waited. "I taught kids how to write stories." The man continued, his gaze fixed on the wet pavement. Now I can't even tell my own." Ethan just nodded slowly. The man let out a long, heavy breath, a sigh that seemed to carry years of weight. "Thanks for listening," he said, looking at Ethan. And in that moment, Ethan realized something profound. Listening, truly listening, was becoming rare. And rare things always have value. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The city outside his window buzzed and hummed with its usual restless energy. But for the first time, something inside him was louder. He thought about the man on the bench, about grace, about his mother. What if people didn't need advice or solutions? What if they just needed a place to be heard? Not judged, not fixed, not interrupted, just heard. The next day, Ethan took a piece of cardboard and a marker. He went to the park and placed a small, simple sign on an empty bench. It read, "I will listen. 10 minutes. Nitrogen monoxide. Phones." He sat down and waited, fully expecting no one to stop. He felt a little foolish. But then, someone did. A young woman on her lunch break. Then an elderly man walking his dog. Then a college student. One after another, people stopped, and the stories poured out. Stories of grief, of regret, of deep-seated fears and long-forgotten dreams. And Ethan just listened. I offered no words, no solutions, just his undivided attention. And as he listened, something in the air began to change. Soon, photos started appearing online. A blurry picture of a man on a bench with a simple cardboard sign. The caption read, "Who is this guy who just listens?" People grew curious. They started showing up, forming a small, quiet line. Some people who sat with him cried, releasing tears they had held back for months. Others smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in what felt like forever. The city didn't get any quieter. Horns still blared, the train still rattled, but it felt softer. The harsh edges seemed to be smoothing out just a little. Of course, with attention comes pressure and critics. His comments appeared online. Who does this guy think he is? A therapist? Listening doesn't fix anything. This is useless. The negative voices got into Ethan's head. He started to doubt himself. Is this whole thing just a stupid, naive idea? Is he really helping anyone? He almost gave up. Till one night, he came home to find his mother sitting on the couch, the TV turned off. She looked at him, and then she patted the cushion beside her. He sat down, and for the first time in years, she spoke. She told him about her loneliness, about her sadness, about how much she missed the man she had married, even after all this time. She talked, and Ethan listened. In their own quiet living room, he gave his mother the same gift he'd been giving to strangers. Ethan never became famous. His face was never on the cover of a magazine, but his idea, his quiet revolution began to spread. In other parks, in other cities, new benches started to appear. Signs written in different handwriting, in different languages, but all with the same simple message: I will listen. It turned out the world didn't need more noise. It didn't need more opinions or more advice. It just needed more people who were willing to be quiet and truly listen to someone else. And sometimes that small act of quiet connection, that was enough to change everything. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the quiet corners of our world. We'll see you next time.